So this is John with padprinters.com. I had a customer ask me the other day to do a little training video on color matching, so I wanted to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to do it off the screen here and talk while I'm explaining what's going on when you're color matching. When you buy the TOSH MX series colors, you have 11 different colors. There's actually 12 including clear, but because we're usually pad printing for opacity, we don't typically sell clear as one of the colorants. If you were printing color for transmission on a clear plastic, then you might want to use clear. Otherwise, you don't need it. So those 11 colors are 00MX white, 101 MX yellow, 102 yellow, 103, which is kind of an orange, 111, which is a bright red, 112, which is another red. Then you have magenta, which is 116, a violet, which is 128, 122 is a blue, and 131 is a green. These colors as they're represented here on this PDF are not necessarily exactly what the colors would look like. And you all finally have 100 MX black. So what does that mean? What is this diagram all about? I'll explain that here in a second. So when you purchase the TOSH inks, you can also get from us the spreadsheet that has the different colors in it. And if you notice down here, there's a tab for HKS, RAL, and Pantone. In the United States, Pantone is the most frequently used color matching system. So over here on column A, on the left, you'll see the Pantone color number. This would correspond to one of the Pantone color splotches that comes in the Pantone book. If you don't have a Pantone book, you can go online and get one of those. You want to get typically the Pantone C, which means coated. Pad printing inks are glossy, so if you're buying a Pantone book, get a Pantone C book. You don't need a U, which is uncoated, because pad printing inks are not flat. The difference is that coated is glossy and flat is matte or flat. There's not gloss to those colors. So second, you would see over here a quantity for color number 1, and then quantity for color number 2, quantity for color number 3, quantity for color number 4. Typically, you're not going to have more than 4 colorants in a color match with MX series inks. So let's pick a color. Let's say we want to go with Pantone 151. So if I highlight this, what you can see is that you have 9.3% MX 00, which is white. You have 81.9% MX 102 and 8.8% MX 111. So if we go back out here and reference those colors, you can see that we have the majority of that formula is comprised of 81.9% 102. So when you look at 102, that's like a bright yellow. Then you have 8.8% 111, which is a red. And finally, the last color, the smallest percentage in there, is white. So this is kind of a orange color, I'm going to guess, from looking at the numbers. So what you would do then is you use a scale and you put your cup on there, plastic cup. Again, we recommend mixing in a plastic cup, not a paper cup with wax or stainless steel or glass. Just use disposable PP or PET plastic cup. You'd put it on your scale and you would zero your scale out or tear it to 0. And then you would add, if you're making 100 grams, because all of these formulas add up to 100, you can then extrapolate it if you want to make a bigger batch or a smaller batch accordingly by multiplying these numbers. But if you were going to go with this color, I would start first with the color that has the most percentage. So I would first put in the cup 81.9 grams of MX 102. So I would go ahead and put in 81.9 grams of 102 right here. Then second, I would add my 9.3 grams of white, 00 MX white, and finally the 8.8 grams of MX 111, which is the bright red. So you notice I'm going here with the highest percentage of ink first, followed by the next, and finally the smallest percentage. The only case where you wouldn't maybe want to do this is it might not be a bad idea to put your white in there last in this case because it's heavier than the other colors, and it would want to sink. And that way, if you put a little bit too much in, you can take the tongue depressor, stir stick, and withdraw a little bit from the formula. So obviously you'll notice that these numbers can get pretty small. If you're taking a 100 gram batch, for example, and you're only adding 8.8 grams, it's okay if you have a scale here that's only accurate to tenths of a gram. But if you're doing smaller batches, or in some of the cases, these colors like right here, if you look at this one, this is 0.3 grams. So if you try to do a smaller batch, you would have to have a scale that's more accurate or accurate to 0.01 or 1/100ths of a gram. In most cases, you can get a scale that's got a couple 100 gram capacity with plus or minus 100 gram, 1/100th of a gram accuracy. That's what you need. So what happens if you go ahead and you mix this color up, the 151, and you stir all the colors together. Now you can't really judge the color by what it looks like on a tongue depressor. So it's really important that you actually print this, because the amount of ink that you have, if you just wipe a tongue depressor, for example, onto a piece of paper and then try to judge if that looks like the color you need, that's not going to be very accurate because you're putting much more ink down than you would if you were pad printing it. So what we usually do is we'll actually take a little bit of the ink out of the cup, put it onto a cliche just by hand with some thinner or hardener if you have to add hardener in production. Stir it onto the surface of the plate a little bit lightly with a tongue depressor, and then just use a doctor ring to draw it across the image area, and then with your hand, use your other hand with a pad and just roll it onto the plate to pick the image up, and then onto a piece of white paper so that you can compare it to the PMS book to see how it looks. If the color needs adjustment, that's where this diagram over here comes into play. So let's say we're making that orange color and we didn't like how it looked. We think that it looked a little bit too yellow. So what might I do if I'm looking at this diagram to make my orange look a little bit more yellow? Well, you could first add a little bit of red. So as you're coming around here, as you're following this around, you're going to go, you can see, from yellow to red. The orange, in order to make it more red, you just add more red to the color. Sometimes you'll get a really weird color where if you're in a gray, for example, grays aren't really represented on this chart, but they lie right here in the middle, kind of between white and black with different colorants in them. If you had a gray, for example, and you were matching up a gray color, and you had a little bit too much red, when you test printed your gray, it looks a little too red. Well, what do you do to correct that? That's where this chart comes in handy, because these colors work against each other. So if you're mixing a gray and it's a little bit red, so let's say it plots over here, you would actually want it to go more green. So then you would go and add a little bit of 131 MX green to get that gray that's too red to go back in the direction you want. Does that make sense? Or if it looked too blue, you would add yellow, and so on. So that's where this diagram is useful when you're color matching. Just print this out and stick it above the table while you do the color matching at. And that way, if you use a formula here and you do a little test print and you determine that you want that color to move in a certain direction, then you can reference this chart and see which one of the colorants you might want to add in order to draw that color match in to be more accurate. So that's color matching in a short video. Hopefully that's helpful for you. If you have any questions, you can contact me at john, John, @padprinters.com. Thank you.